Coaches Show presented by Smith's. Low prices and market fresh, the official sponsor of Utah basketball and the Utah Basketball Coaches Show. For the next hour, we're going to talk Utah basketball. Talk a little bit about the game last weekend against Tulsa. We'll talk about BYU. We'll talk about the conference and anything you guys want to talk about. Certainly fair game. If you want to reach the program, a couple of ways to do so. You can hit us up on the text line 877-353-0700, or feel free to hit me up on Twitter at ESPN700Bill. Questions, thoughts, opinions, anything you want to bring on about Utah basketball, we'll certainly get to tonight as we talk Utah basketball for the next hour with Larry right here. Of course, coming up this week, we've got the game against BYU in the Beehive Classic. We'll recap the Tulsa game, talk about some of the personnel things and growing with these full weeks of practice in between games, and look around the Pac-12 conference as well. How you doing?
Doing good. Yeah.
Had a good week?
Yeah, we had a good week. We, dodged a bullet maybe. Didn't play particularly well in the game, but got the W, which is a big thing, and then had a good practice today. We have a lot of things that we need to get fixed, but we're working, man.
Tell me what you liked about the Tulsa game. You were in that game. You led the game most of the way, but what did you like most about that game?
Well, we played zone an awful lot of the game. I thought we made some progress. There was some energy, I thought, from certain guys. I thought Donnie comes to mind, Jace comes to mind from a defensive point of view. There's things that we're talking about throughout the course of the week that really you could tell who took those things to heart. I thought defensive rating-wise, those two were as good as they've ever been. As you know, in basketball, it takes all five. I think Booth is getting better, figuring some things out. He led us in scoring. But we still, just kind of the nature of coaching. Right. You never get too excited about it. We've still got a lot of things that we need to fix, and broke down the video. It was nice playing a little bit of an earlier game Saturday. When it's getting dark as early as it is, it seemed late, but I was home and kind of unwound, and I watched BYU Weber on TV later that night. And then next thing you know, it's 9 o'clock, and then you get the whole day off.
Yep.
So these weeks are hard for us. We'll hit it hard Monday, Tuesday, have a little scrimmage type setting on Wednesday to mix it up, and then the noon tip-off on Saturday kind of makes it a short week.
You like the early tips, don't you?
I do. I just go crazy throughout the course of the day. I just hope our players do. We've got some guys that haven't necessarily responded real well when you're at noon or before noon, and we've talked to those guys about those games. But I just get jittery and nervous all day long, and if I had my druthers, I'd like to get it done.
I mean, that's how it was in the old days. You'd play noon, midday, afternoon basketball games on Saturday.
Yeah, back, in most conferences it was Thursday, Saturday, and a lot of them were in the afternoon, a little matinee, and then, you had your traditional Sunday off, which is nice. This year we've only got the one Sunday game against Colorado, where I think we had 5 last year, 3 in a row, which, you really realize how important it is to have that day off, not just for the players, a true day off, where they don't have class, they don't have practice. We had a lot of days off last year that were a Monday or that doesn't do them a lot of good, because they got to grind and go to class. So you just feel like you're always coming up for air. So, the schedule sets up a little bit better in that regard this year.
You mentioned Jason, the game the other day. He ended up with a double-double, 12 points and 12 rebounds. And, for my money, and you guys look at it a little bit differently to me, but I thought it was the best game he's played this year.
Yeah, I do too. And when there's karma in basketball. And I see a correlation with guys that are really dialed in during the week in practice. We talked about not letting easy post catches in, guys ducking you in. And I watched the game Sunday night back at my house, and Jace was out in front of guys, denying, fighting touches, sprinted back on defense. We kind of did a little tag team with him and Novi, about 5-minute stretches. And, when those guys are fresh and they really got up and down the court defensively, flying around, he did a great job protecting the rim for us on a number of wall plays. Not necessarily going to block the shot or take a charge, but he's up presenting 2 hands high, which all the officials are talking about now, and really patrolled the paint for us well. And, missed a couple bunnies early, but has slowed down, made a couple of nice plays, and then the free throw line. I'll tell you a little story from practice. He struggled at the free throw line. Everybody had to make one, and it ended up being quite a conditioning drill for us, which I also think we need to improve on. Being in shape, that's a big part of the game. But when that practice was over, he hit about 3 out of 6, and then I pulled him aside, and we talked about balance, and we talked about finishing to the rim and not straight up. And I'll be danged, he shot 10 free throws, he made all 10 of them. So I said, we're going to stop right there. But I think sometimes just a little confidence and some reps and a little simple thought. So hopefully he can be one of those guys. You don't want to have a guy on the floor that the other team can foul.
Right. Or a guy you have to take out in the last 5 minutes of the game.
Because he can't be fouled,
right.
And if Jace is your best rebounder, what happens if you're up 10? He gets a rebound, they hack him. And, they don't have the NBA hack-a-shack deal, but he's gaining confidence with it, and I think he's going to be in a good place. But I agree with you. I think it was one of his better performances.
How much of it, too, is, for those that haven't paid close attention, he missed the entire month of October. He was out with the foot issue, and I'm just wondering how much, too, of it is just he didn't have that last month to slam bodies against other guys, to have that, and you can put him on a stationary bike, but a stationary bike's not running up and down the floor. Do you feel like maybe now, after a month of being back, he's finally getting back to where he should be? Not
only that, Bill, I think it's, but if you go into all of last year, he was hurt all of last year. And now he played with plantar fascia.
Right.
And I've had that, and I've torn it, and I know that it's no fun. And so what happened last year was Jace remained serviceable, and I'm not sure a lot of guys wouldn't have tapped out, and not because he's a tough kid. But he played through it, but we never could do any extra conditioning. We always had to limit practices. So you're talking about the last month he's had under his belt, but I would take it back a full year to where now, when we did our conditioning tests in September, he was off the charts. He'd never completed that many, So really had done a nice job with the health of his foot, and then had the other setback come up with the bone. But I really think maybe we're at a position where he can start making some serious progress. The other guy that's been up and down for you a little bit so far, at least at the start of the year, has been Cedric. We've been used to seeing him being a scorer, and Saturday was a perfect example. He goes 0 for the first half. I think he missed 5 shots, took 5 shots, missed 5 shots. But in the second half, he comes out, knocks down 4 threes, and gets an old-fashioned three-point play, ends up being tied with Booth as a leading scorer. So what's going on with Cedric right now, and is it just a matter of him finding that right balance in shooting basketball? We spent about a half an hour today. I watched a little bit of film. It was really hard last week. We didn't want to talk about it, but said he had strep throat.
Right.
Diagnosed Monday, so missed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and most of Thursday with the strep throat. Started to recover, but the antibiotics he was on gave him an intestinal problem. So he didn't practice. We had an early shoot-around. Was the first time he was out on the floor. So I'm not going to put too much into it. Consistency from a senior is important because it wasn't just the performance a little bit up and down, kind of spotty from a defensive mindset and an effort mindset. The first half of our game against Tulsa, he took a number of bad shots.
Right.
So they're not going to go in. And you don't need to put heat on yourself. And as we watched film, there's 4 defenders in the paint waiting for him to make his move. He tried to make a little left-handed layup that got blocked, took a real contested 3 with the 7-footer flying at him. So some of it's self-inflicted. And then also in that first half, passed up great shots, where you're wide open and you pump fake and then you end up making it harder than it is. So that was the message I gave him at half is, you don't do this to yourself. You've got to, when you're open, we'd rather have you shooting more than anybody on our team. So don't pass those up. And then he did hit a couple good ones, but don't put us in a bad way because you're trying to do things that's not there. I think the scouting report's kind of out, and so that's one of the things that we need to get real contagious with our team is extra pass stuff right now.
The last thing on the game, you and I talked about in the pregame show about sometimes simplifying things, and you said, hey, I'll put some of that stuff on me, especially on offense. Did you feel like simplifying things helped on Saturday?
Well, yeah, I did. I think we were a little bit uptight coming out. We really set the game back from a spectator watching point of view. I mean, it was like 8-5 after 12 minutes or something, So it's not like things were really fluid and rolling. But again, when you have that layoff, sometimes it takes a little while, miss some bunnies. So we have simplified it. I think that it's a work in progress with these single games, you know, as we talked about for 3 weeks in a row, where that leaves a lot of practice. There's a lot of things that we need to improve on. So hopefully some of that simplification can be paid off with some reps in practice.
We'll talk about what that full week of practice means last week, this week, and next week when we come up in the next segment. Tonight's Coach's Show being brought to you by Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch, proud supporter of Utah Athletics, always reminding you to enjoy responsibly. We'll take our first time out here on the Coach's Show presented by Smith's. And when we come back, a little bit about what the week looks like as you get ready when you have so much practice time with the guys. It's almost like a preseason. We'll do that next. This is Utah basketball from Learfield. Here, our Team Player of the Week, and of course our Subway sub. But a little bit more depth about what you were talking about in the first segment, Larry, about the week-long practice. You don't get that kind of time, especially in conference season. It's usually almost a training camp-like setup. You don't have, this is the only time during the year you're going to have week between games, except for the one time against Colorado. But besides that, it's a week long, so you've got to pace yourself. But what are some of the things you want to get done during the week?
Well, I think, last week, between Cedric's illness, and we had a couple guys that were really beat up with some foot injuries and different things where you had to go kind of light. The timing was good.
Sure.
We probably practiced an hour and 45 minutes a day. We did a lot of shooting. I think it's important when you're moving into finals. This is the last week of class before finals the next week. So we've got a lot of guys. You know, I looked at our schedule. Our record was 3-3, but we only had 2 home games.
Right.
So 2/3 of our season was on the road. 3 of them in Anaheim and 1 in Minnesota. So we haven't been home, which means there's some class issues, and guys, have to catch up. It's an important part of this process. So I think the timing is good. The key is, I think, to throw in some competitive. We've got things to fix in a drill type session. We've got components that you want to spend 20 or 30 minutes, the rebounding, the transition, whatever it is you're doing defensively, man and zone. And then I think, like I said, Wednesday night will be a good night for us to play like a scrimmage, where you're just playing, and you got to simulate that kind of game thing. You
Right.
can't go that long without having that feeling. And I think that was some of the uneasiness maybe with our game against Tulsa. We hadn't been in our building for a couple weeks, since we opened the season. So there's a little bit of newness to that. And you don't want to talk too much and make too much out of it. And I think you have to throw some curveballs at your guys. But the rest and the academic piece is probably really important.
You talk about wanting to simulate game situations and getting out there and doing that. In game situations, you want to have that rotation of guys too. Are you getting close? I mean, have you had enough games, or is it still a work in progress on kind of your rotation, your top 7, top 8 guys?
Well, I think we're getting close. I'd sure like to play some guys, some more minutes, that's for sure. I think our young kids are growing. I think we're at about 8 or 9 guys right now when you look at the roster that we're at. But things change quickly, man.
Yeah.
It takes a couple of whistles, and a guy goes. I look at a guy like Chuck that didn't hardly play the other night, but at this point he's our 4th guard, and we haven't really, knock on wood, we haven't experienced any foul trouble. But that's one of those away, or knock on wood again, you got injuries. So things change fast. I think it's just important that guys grind. The practices are still competitive. Our second unit today beat the starters in a couple of up and down sessions where we put something on the line and let's play a 4-minute deal. And so it's extremely competitive. And I don't think that it's really set in my mind exactly who our starters are. And this is really one of the first years that I'm fine with thinking about some matchups potentially. Who makes more sense, or who's having a good week, because we're just at that point right now where we've got a lot of things still up in the air.
You started Riley Batten the other night, gave you 31 minutes. I think he had 9 points. Timmy Allen came off the bench for the first time. What was the thought behind that?
Well, my thought is maybe just having a little bit more versatility coming off the bench, where number one, Riley's been playing well.
Yep.
When you look, we've got all kind of analytics, and I don't need to bore you with them, but trust that there's some really smart people, smarter than you and I are, that tell us, it's not just the old plus-minus deal, but it's production, the time you're on the floor, how many more positive plays than negative plays, efficiency when you're on the floor of offense and defense. There's all kinds of crazy things. And Riley was the one guy across the board through 4 different categories that was green. And there's only 2 or 3 green guys in each column. So that was a guy, not only was he a green guy in plus minus, but production and efficiency and all those things. So as a coach, you kind of go, let's get him out there.
Right.
And I think he makes other guys better. Prior to our last game, he had 8 assists and 1 turnover. Needs to do some things better. But if Timmy's coming off the bench, Timmy can come in for Donnie or Riley. Because Timmy plays 3 and 4. Right. Riley doesn't play 3. So if Riley comes off the bench, he's basically coming in at the power forward, and it kind of pigeonholes you a little bit in that regard. And Timmy's been a little bit trying to figure some things out too. And we're completely behind him 100%. He stands for a lot of the right things, but maybe it's a little much. And I talked to him before shoot-around. He said, I said, why do you think I'm not starting you? And he said, maybe just think I can give you a little bit more coming off the bench and injecting something in the game. Bingo, And his term was, I'm not tripping. He doesn't care whether he's coming in or off the bench or starting. And he's been one of the better players in practice. From the time practice started today till it ended, when we had a lot of tongues hanging out of guys' mouth from the conditioning, Timmy's yelling at the whole team, we're not tired. We're not tired. So, he's cut of the right stuff, and I think it's all part of this process. And Riley did a decent job too. They're both freshmen, so it's nice knowing those guys will be in the program for a while.
The other thing too is, and you know this, it goes back to some freshmen and even younger players, freeing your mind up. Some of those guys just may be a little bit better coming in off the bench, but it goes back to that old adage: would you rather start or would you rather finish?
Yeah.
You want to be on the floor in the first 5 minutes of the game or the last 5 minutes of the game, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. And we truth be known, we haven't dazzled people coming out of the locker room when it comes to, we had 2 offensive sets that we tried to run against Tulsa, and we've been talking about them all week, speaking of the simplify the offense. And we had 2 guys brain fart the first play coming down, and then 1 guy do the same thing the second time. So we were 0 for when, you know it's coming. So sometimes that's an indication that guys might not be ready to start. If you've got some of these issues going on where you're not really ready, and some guys are better starting than they are coming off the bench and vice versa. So until we can figure that out and get enough of a sample size, it's still yet to be determined.
Are you getting at any segment in these games the type of pace of play? Because you talked in the offseason about with some of these guys wanting to push it and getting out and running. Well, you can really push it and get out and run when you get defensive stops. You can't really do that when you're taking the ball out of the basket. So are there segments of some of these games where you are getting the type of pace of play you want?
They're briefly kind of showing their head. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of guys going to rebound with one hand. We're locked up. We spent a lot of time on rebounding today in practice. The concept of doing a lot of your work, your physicality with something that doesn't involve your arms. As you know, with the new hook and hold deal,
Yep.
The last thing you want to do is be playing twister with somebody and grabbing them because it's a foul. But more importantly, when a lot of these shots are coming off the rim, you need 2 hands. And so we talked about, moving guys out, getting your hands ready, preparing, because you can't run if you don't do that. And that's when we've done it well and blocked out and get a board, you can see us, we got a chance. But until we rebound and shore up some of those areas, that's not going to be a big focal point for us, But we did. That was something that we talked about. When we played BYU, they pushed the tempo. You better be back and get ready for some defensive transition. And if you don't simulate that in an offensive setting in practice this week, then that's going to be new to you on Saturday too. I think they play at the 10th fastest pace in the country. So I'd like to do a better job of it, starting with the rebounding, and certainly we've got to be ready. The other team's got to get back and put that fire out too.
You had to feel like you're watching an NBA game the way they and Weaver went up the floor the other night, up and down the floor. It was 113-103.
Yeah,
that's not a typical college game.
No, that was really wild. I mean, there were a number of free throws late as BYU was trying to foul. But that was crazy, seeing that kind of pace and how many points were scored. Certainly in a in-state rivalry game, typically there's a little more D brought to the party than that. But there's a lot of firepower too.
We'll talk about BYU coming up here on the Coaches Show. Next segment, though, we're going to pass out our weekly awards. Our Team Player of the Week, our Subway Sub of the Week. We'll do that coming up. And just a reminder, Utah basketball this year, and the Coaches Show, too, being brought to you by our friends at Nissan. They know the game day is all about the winning drive, and their winning drive includes the Rogue with available technologies to help the day's best drive, getting to the game and to the arena. Nissan, proud supporter of college and Utah athletics. Back with more of the Coaches Show straight ahead from up here on campus tonight at the Huntsman Basketball Facility. This is Utah basketball from Learfield. How far out are we, JP? Okay. Tonight presented by Smith's. It's gotten a little chilly here in the office, so we're warming up by the fire right here. It only took you about 7 tries to get that thing lit.
Yeah, well, I'm not very mechanically inclined. I'm just glad I didn't blow the office up.
Oh yeah, there would have been 7 casualties up here on the 4th floor of the basketball facility. We've got BYU coming up on Saturday. We'll talk about the Cougars and the Beehive Classic coming up in just a few minutes, but let's start with our weekly awards. Our Team Utah Player of the Week, kind of your MVP of the week. Only one game this week to talk about, so who are you going to award that Team Player of the Week to?
Well, I think Booth is probably our guy for starting the game and being solid and having a lot thrown at him. He did a nice job in our zone, contested a bunch of those shots. They missed a bunch of threes, and a lot of them were open threes,
right.
But there were a lot of them that Booth kind of got his length involved with at the end to save the day and hit some big shots for us and some free throws. So he's coming along nicely. You're
asking him to run the point quite a bit. You're asking him to do a lot. I think he played 27 minutes for you the other day at the point guard spot, and you know he's a freshman. He's a kid grew up in Minnesota, played prep school last year in Arizona. But kind of walk us through how you guys found him, his recruitment a little bit, and how he's been since he's been in the program for you.
Well, Coach Connor and I actually at the end of July, after we spent most of July out on the road, and a lot of the basketball at the end of the third period is a little bit raw, rugged, and it's not a lot of fun for the coaches or the players. It's a little too much to ask of those kids. And we were in a gym watching another player and looked over, and both of us were kind of watching out of the corner of our eye this other kid that reminded both of us a little bit of DeLon. And I think once you have a little taste of a guy like DeLon, it's always something you're out on the road trying to find again. And Coach Connor did a really good job, recruiting him, and we stayed on it and put a lot of time and effort in it. And I think he fits, what it is we're trying to do. And he's been a great worker, kind of a tireless worker. He's dealt with a couple nagging injuries, but this is the first time in his life and many of the other freshmen where you really realize how hard it is academically on the court. But he keeps grinding, and he's got a tremendous motor, and he's a joy to coach.
Seems to do a lot of things pretty well. What's he doing best right now?
I think there's a lot on his brain. One of the things I've been most impressed with is making free throws.
Yeah.
He moves the ball. He's got a nice feel. We continue to make improvement in pick and roll, making some plays. He had some pretty deeply ingrained habits, with how he would use the pick and roll up until this point, and now it's kind of becoming more like the quarterback mindset, where this is your first read, second read, third read, and that's coming a little bit. But he's a tremendous passer. Gets into the lane. You've seen him in some games where he's one of the guys that can get in and use his length, and if they have any kind of collapsing, he hits a guy on time and on target oftentimes. But he does a nice job in transition as well, and just keeps getting better. I think he's one of those beneficiaries of simplifying some things and just getting out and trusting his instincts a little bit more.
There was a play the other night in the game that kind of reminded me. You mentioned DeLon. I remember DeLon that first year he was in the program. He would get in the lane, and guys would then turn to either make a rebound or get in position, and he would throw a pass, and sometimes maybe Dallin wasn't ready for that pass initially and early.
Yeah.
By the end of the season, he was. He made that pass to Jace the other night. He got in the lane, and Jace was open, but he kind of whipped it over his head, and Jace was looking for a shot that went out of bounds. And I think that's one of those things. He's got great vision, and guys have to get used to playing with that kind of passer.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And, you know, I think in fairness to some of our bigs, they haven't been used an awful lot, you know, in pick and roll. So you get kind of accustomed to going in and jockeying for position and thinking about the rebound. And that's one of the things in the last week that we've talked about is when those 5 men are setting the pick and rolls, let's make sure we get our 5 men to the front of the rim. Look for them early, look for them late. A lot of times somebody rotates, covers them up briefly, and then tries to get back out to the shooter, and that's that late pass to them. So by doing some of those drills, I think we saw a little bit of it, you know, with that kind of connection. But the more these guys play with each other and get those reps, I think the more they'll understand that. It didn't take long for the Dallins of the world to keep your hands ready.
Exactly.
You know, once you learned that that was part of it, and that's part of building the chemistry, I think, of our team that people are talking about a little bit. How long is it going to take? It's just, it takes the reps and it takes the experience together. So
it will be Booth Gotch, who is our University of Utah Health and Sports Medicine Team Player of the Week this week. You can find him online at sportsmed.uofuhealth.org. They'll have a game plan for you and your family's health. Subway Sub, you had didn't have as much production off the bench as you have had in recent games, but maybe Timmy Allen?
Yeah, I thought Timmy did a nice job. You know, had 4 or 5 points, assists, rebounds, was steady Eddie. You know, guards his butt off and is a physical presence for us. So need to keep that rolling. You know, it's not easy for these freshmen, and you know, it's good. They just keep coming. Like I talked about how inspiring he was in practice. We had some guys giving us a big lift today. I think of Timmy was one of those guys, Chuck was one of those guys, and Donnie was one of those guys where they came in, you know, after a day off and they're charged up. It's always been our goal, and you can talk about it, but you need to come in and practice every day as though you lost the previous game. And, you know, you got to have that kind of edge. And I think our team, Coach Connor addressed it after the game. I kind of addressed it on the season. There aren't going to be many easy ones.
Right.
You know, you got to get into the grind it out mentality. You got to earn some stuff, and we need to get that edge to us, and it really starts in practice. And I think both those guys that were the award winners for the player of the game and the sub of the game, those were guys that kind of lived that all last week, and it was fitting that they got those awards. So
Timmy Allen, our Subway Sub of the Week, brought to you by Subway, with 5 $4.99 foot-long sub options right now at Subway. We'll take a break. When we come back, maybe a couple of questions from the crowd tonight via Twitter or via text at ESPN 700 Bill or 877-353-0700. And, of course, talk a little bit about the BYU Cougars coming up on Saturday in the Beehive Classic downtown. Noontime tip-off right here on ESPN 700 and along the network as well. It's the early game. Utah and BYU will be the early game Saturday. The second game of the Beehive Classic will be Utah State and Weber State. Should be 2 pretty good games downtown this weekend. This is the Coaches Show presented by Smith's and Utah Basketball from Learfield. Booth had a couple of big shots on Saturday, and his shot coming along really nicely. We welcome you back into the Coaches Show tonight. Presented by Smith's, Mountain Dew Code Red, a proud sponsor of Utah basketball. If you want to get yourself jacked up and ready to go for a Utah basketball game like maybe Saturday's Beehive Classic, enjoy a nice Mountain Dew Code Red, proud sponsors of Utah athletics. Not going to be playing this one on campus, though. Beehive Classic. Same as last year, you got to play Utah State. This year, it's BYU. I've always been a fan of rivalry games on campus, whether at the Huntsman Center or the Marriott Center. You'll play this one downtown on the neutral court.
Yeah, well, I'm with you.
You like playing them on campus too, don't you?
Sure.
Mostly rivalry games.
Yeah.
This one's legislated
Absolutely.
and playing it downtown, so you'll
Yeah.
play it down at the Jazz Arena.
Yeah, no, I think for fans in the state, it's a positive thing to go to one building and catch 4 teams. From a purity point of view, I'm not sure it's in anybody's best interest, but that's above my pay grade. So we're looking forward to playing.
Well, your kids will like playing down there. There's something cool about playing in an NBA arena too, right?
Yeah, no, I think without a doubt, there's a special vibe in there, and the place is big, and it's rocking, and it'll be different environment for us for sure. But I think it's fun that you look at history. I think BYU's 10-0 or 11-0 when they play in that building. So, it's an uphill battle for us. We haven't played an awful lot of games in that building.
Right.
So we got to be ready to rock.
A lot of the same guys you saw a year ago when you played them down there. Yoli Childs is back. TJ Hawes is back. So you've got those two guys. They've kind of led the way a little bit. I know you watched them Saturday night, and you'll watch the tape this week as you get ready as well. What stands out about this year's BYU team?
Well, the pace at which they play. I mean, 11th in pace and getting up and down the floor, is witnessed by the Weber game with close to 120 points. Each team. Yoli Childs, I'm a big fan of what he's done. Super willing passer. He's a load in the post, hitting threes, blocking shots. Tremendous player. And then TJ has given him great lifts in a lot of games. Hardnett at the point guard is a physical kid. And then they're a little bit like us. They've got a bunch of players, but
Right.
It's been the consistency. After you get, you look past that, the first 3 guys on their scouting report, they got a bunch of guys that can hurt you, and you can't sleep on them, and shoot the basketball.
And if I'm not mistaken, Nick Emery comes back this week too. I think his first game will be midweek against Utah State. I think you guys might be the second game, assuming everything clicks into place that he didn't, he hasn't played in a year or so.
See, that's another unknown when it comes to the scouting report, but I think we understand, what Nick does, and he's going to give him another threat on the perimeter that can stretch the floor and shoot. So, one more weapon for them.
Anything different about them? No team is the same every single year. Personnel changes. They've had some coaching changes. Some guys move in and move out. For the most part, though, philosophically, have they changed a whole lot?
No, I don't think there's a whole lot of change. I mean, Dave has done a great job there. That's the reality. The guys play with an awful lot of confidence, and they've done a great job. It seems like they get better. Last year they had a nice run at the end of the season as well. So it's they've gone out on the road and played some difficult games. When you look at their schedule, it's a difficult run, and I think they, like some schools, understand that it's going to take something extra in the preseason to get that NCAA bid, playing in that conference. And things are proven to be the same in our conference right now too. We got to get out. You got to do some work this time of year. So it's a big game for both teams.
It's a rivalry game. You had a bunch of Utah guys on the roster a year ago. You had Dave, and you had Ty, and you had Parker, and things like that. Not quite as many on this year's team. Do you have to let some of these new guys know a little bit about this game, or are they pretty informed on the rivalry?
That's probably a good point. I think they hear plenty of it, but it's, like the Parker's grown up with it.
Exactly.
And you've got guys with that experience. Now that'll be something that we educate our guys on through some film. Some storytelling is always part of a program, I think, to help keep things alive. Certainly the Utah ties change next year when you look at the recruits that we have coming in.
Exactly.
There'll be 4 guys rolling in, a couple off their missions and a couple from high school. So, you know, it's a little bit cyclical in that regard. But by the time Saturday rolls around, everybody's going to have a full understanding for what this means.
Should be four good teams, 2 competitive games down there. Your game first, and then obviously that Utah State and Weber State game in the second game.
Well, both those teams are playing great.
They are.
You know, Craig's done a great job. Utah State playing as well as anybody. And then Weber with the big win over BYU, and they're playing well. They had one little blip against the team they shouldn't have lost to without their leading scorer. You know, and Randy's. There's some basketball teams in our state. There's no doubt about it, and it's fun to watch everybody within their respective conference, and this brings it all together, all 2 ahead in one building, and hopefully we can get the place rocking.
That'll be Saturday afternoon at Vivint Smart Home Arena, noontime for Utah and BYU. The game that will follow a half hour after will be Utah State and Weber State. If you love good hoops, this is in-state hoops. You buy a ticket, get a couple of good games. Should be a lot of fun coming up on Saturday afternoon. Of course, Jimmy and I will have the broadcast for you pregame beginning at 11. We'll take a timeout. We'll come back. We'll have a couple of questions from the audience when we come back, and I'm going to make this part of our new part of our show this year. We'll have our 3 questions and 2-man weave, but I also will have a rule question of the week for Larry Krystkowiak. All that coming up on the Coach's Show.
The rules?
Yeah, maybe. Presented by Smith's and right here from Learfield. Yeah, Booth, another 3 on Saturday. He had 3 of them all told and 15 points. Utah won it over Tulsa. We welcome you back into the Coaches Show tonight. A couple of questions from the audience tonight. This one comes in from Rhino. Rhino wants to know, Larry, what are the realistic expectations for this team? What do you think the ceiling is, and what's it going to take to get there for this particular team?
Well, I've never really gotten that involved with, with having goals and wins and totals. We always want to get to the NCAA tournament.
Right.
You're scratch and claw until somebody tells us that you can't get there. And obviously within our conference tournament, even if your season doesn't go, amazingly well, you can get into that tournament. And one of the goals that we've had is to try to finish in the top 4 in our conference, so you don't have to win 4 games. That's punching it. And then you kind of reverse plan back. We're heading into a point of the season where we got to get some of these wins.
Right.
As you talk about BYU, and you got Nevada, and you got Kentucky, some of these games, that's where you make a little hay and then get into a conference season, which we're all, at that point it'll wipe the slate clean and y'all start fresh, and we play, a lot of difficult games. So I've always thought that the goal for our team, let's just keep getting better. You might take a step or 2 back, but always make sure you take a couple more forward and keep the graph moving in an upward direction. And I think the wins and losses take care of themselves if you approach it that way, and not get too carried away with goals. We used to have a deal in the NBA when I played for a great friend, Del Harris, would always say, well, we got to win 3 out of the next 5 in the NBA. And then I always thought, well, what if you win your first 3? Then are you still inspired to win the 4th and the 5th? Or
right.
If you lose 3 of the first 5, that means you can't get your goal. So I've never really been into the numbers as much. I just know we're going to keep pushing buttons with our guys and try to improve the things that we don't do well, and keep sharpening the saw with the things that we are doing well.
Speaking of improving, Jiganator on Twitter says, what's the #1 area where the team must get better right now?
Well, 2 things for sure is the things that happen the most frequently, and those are rebounds.
Okay.
We've got to be much more consistent in rebounding collectively and get a little bit of the dog mentality. And then the defensive transition. We're still lacking with the sense of urgency to get back, and it's not always textbook. Sometimes, there's all different scenarios, and we try to put those in a practice setting. But the term we're using is put the fire out. If you're at a high, you don't have your guy anymore, but you've got to cover the ball, you've got to cover the basket. Those are
right.
the high impact ones, and then you've got to load to the ball and guard it collectively and connected. And that seems to be taking a while for us to get that concept down.
All right, last thing. This one's for me.
Yeah.
We talked last week about the rule that is being emphasized this year. It's a new rule, the hook and hold rule, which for good or for bad, that's being emphasized. Is there a rule out there that say that the head of officiating for the NCAA, I don't know, it used to be John Adams, I don't know who it is now. He comes to you and says, Larry, what's a rule that you would like to see us put more emphasis on? What would it be?
Well, unfortunately, we've talked about it in all the years, and I've been playing and coaching. It's cleaning up the post play.
Okay.
And we talk about it, but it doesn't get any cleaner. To me, the post player is being phased out of the game with a number of the rules. You've seen last year, I saw more offensive foul when you teach a kid to post up. If you're standing up, I was always taught, go into his space, ask for the ball. Well, those were a lot of offensive fouls because I got into your cylinder.
Right.
So watch now what happens. Donnie had what I thought was a really obvious layup Saturday afternoon and went in, and the guy just came flying at him, but he put both his hands up and fouled the crap out of him with his whole body, knocked Donnie to the ground. And our referee, and no disrespect to our refs, the referee's going like this to me. No, his hands are straight up. So now we can just kill guys. You can foul
as long as you go straight up.
As long as you put your hands up. And so you see a lot of what's happening is it doesn't make sense to throw the ball into the post anymore. And you do this wall thing, and to me that's one of the things I'd like to see cleaned up in the perfect world. So we'll see.
Post play.
The 6 foul deal.
Oh yeah, but that's not a rule
that's
right now.
That's another topic.
You got to make that a rule before you can emphasize that as a rule. Come back, our 3-question, 2-man weave for the coach. Maybe it's basketball related, maybe it's not. Final segment of the Coaches Show presented by Smith's is next, right here from Learfield. Jace Johnson, double-double Saturday. We'd love to see another double-double out of him coming up this Saturday against BYU. All right, we've got about 2 minutes left in the show. We go to our three-question, two-man weave, and we begin things with a basketball-esque question. If you're out there on the floor playing a little horse with your boys or with the team or with the coaches, what's your go-to shot? What's the money shot for you that you know you're going to make?
Well, I like a top of the circle 3-point shot.
Okay, just a straightaway?
That's probably my favorite shot.
Okay.
Yep.
No, nothing tricky.
Well, yeah, there's no. I mean, I got a trick shot, but it's not legal.
Oh, okay. Not even in horse?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Top of the key, three.
Pretty boring. Or a dunk, really.
But you can't dunk.
No, you're right.
Yeah, that's the dunking. You can't do that because not
can't
everybody's
physically.
6'10". Well, you can't anymore. Can you get up and dunk anymore?
No.
Really?
I'd have to practice.
Oh man, we'll get you a trampoline.
2 knee replacements, dude.
And you got a hip coming too, or just
Maybe,
the knees?
probably a hip too. Yeah.
All right, favorite Pearl Jam album or song, or both?
My favorite song, without a doubt, is "Just Breathe."
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite album?
Probably Vitality. Yeah.
All right. Last question. Favorite genre of movie? Not favorite movie, but if you're going for a genre.
No, that's a good question because I was going through the guide with our daughters last night.
Trying to come up with something to watch?
It's hard because, I used to enjoy movies, maybe my wife and I, or just myself going to the theater.
Yeah.
But the kids are always involved now.
So you got to go like rom-com.
So
if it's just you though.
I like a suspense, something that's keeping you,
I guess you'd be a Western guy
attention.
too. You like a good Western?
Yeah. Yeah, what was the Dances with Wolves was
That's a
good
good
one.
movie. All right, that's it for the Coaches Show. We'll have a better three-question weave next week. Vitality is very good. See you Saturday.
Did I say vitality? That's me. That's what I need.
Some vitality?
Vitality.
Vitality?
Vitology. Yeah.
Vitology. Isn't it vitology?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's vitology.
I think I said vitality, though.